We've criticized those who have fallen short and selfishly proclaimed ourselves righteous. We failed to understand the spirit of the commandments and the way that we're shown by you to live, loving God and loving our neighbors. Forgive us for turning your law into burdens for others and ourselves, instead of a way to love and freedom in you. In the name of Christ, who has given us the way and leads us on, we pray. Amen. And please listen to the assurance of pardon. You are loved. Love is the way. When you love God, you love others. When you truly lay down your life for others, you lay down your life for God. Give yourself to God by serving others, and know that in God's love there is forgiveness, healing, and reconciliation. Amen.
Beautiful. So today we have an interesting scripture verse. I've had a few of my brothers come by and say, "Whoa, what are you going to do today?" We talk about the idea Jesus is in the midst of talking about adultery, divorce, murder, and hell. So we thought we would attack those right off the bat. Do we have that little video? Can you show me that little video real quick? Thank you. Adultery, divorce, in that doesn't it just about like every television show we watch? It's about murder, divorce, adultery, hell, just those types of things. And it was like, well, that's too priceless not to use and utilize the idea that Jesus is talking about these things. So we have to understand that Jesus is just coming out of kind of the 5 blessings of the Sermon on the Mount. And he's now going into this idea of what takes away joy. And so last week we talked about the idea of joy and all the things that give us joy. And I forgot to tell you the one thing that I meant to tell you this. One of the joys I got is seeing people. I went to see the Dalai Lama and Bishop Tutu speak. Pretty powerful people, right? The Dalai Lama and again, Bishop Tutu. And they were there at Northeast. And I was there to watch them, and I'm sitting there, and I watched them walk in and onto the stage from either side. And they're like looking at each other, and they're like, and their mics are on, and so you can see that they're laughing at each other as they come out. And they walk out, the Dalai Lama gets about this far from Bishop Tutu and goes, "You gained weight." And Bishop Tutu took another step towards him and said, "But you're still ticklish." And that's how they greeted each other. It gave me tremendous joy, absolutely tremendous joy, to see these two people, these two incredible spiritual people, laughing and just kidding each other. And I think that that's where we are constantly looking for, where do I get joy? And sometimes it's just from those small things that you see. We talked about last week, the idea that I was driving down A1A and I saw this man standing out there in polka dot shorts, very short polka dot shorts, spandex polka dot shorts to be even more visual, and black socks and black dress shoes. and no shirt. And I just loved it. I wanted to pull over and go like, just tell me, what was the decision tree you used this morning? Like where did you get, because it just gave me such joy. And so Jesus is talking about this idea of all this joy and how we do this. And so now we're going to talk about the idea of those things that can steal joy away from us. And we're going to talk about it and look at it through a historical lens, which is very important that we look at it this way. Many scholars believe that this was probably some of the most important teachings of Jesus. Probably some of the most important teachings in the whole New Testament. And so we remember that we're coming out of the Sermon on the Mount, basically the blessings that he did, and he's around a whole bunch of different people. I think the Hebrew term was mishmash of people. And there are all these different people of all different walks of life. There are people that are very religious and people that are not religious, and there are people who believe in multiple gods, and then there are people that are really, really legalistically religious. A group of people that don't like Jesus, that would like to see him taken down. And they've been starting to talk about the idea that he is destroying the laws, that he is teaching against the laws of Moses. And so Jesus knows this, and he knows that that's what he's up against. He knows that actually these accusations have been being made. And so Jesus uses this way of talking into them, this idea of, you've heard it said, you should not murder. 10 Commandments. But I tell you, you should. And he goes on and expands. He expands the understanding of the law. He doesn't change it. He just adds on to it. This was what God is looking for, but God is also looking for it to be larger than that. So you have 10 Commandments, and that's where we started off, 10. And we are such a legalistic humanity that we developed another 603 after that. So you've got 613 commandments. Because why? We argue really well. You should not murder. Who? Who should I not? What does murder really mean? You mean I shouldn't be able to kill somebody else? I shouldn't be able to go to war? I shouldn't be able... Anyway, so we start breaking things down. You should celebrate the Sabbath. Really? I should celebrate the Sabbath. Well, what is celebrating the Sabbath? Well, you don't work on the Sabbath. Really? So what's work? And so you have law after law after law saying what work is on the Sabbath. Well, you can't walk more than 3 miles because then it's work. What about those joggers? On the Sabbath, jogging around here, What about the idea? And so I'm in Israel, and the Sabbath comes, Sabbat comes, and the issues come up to is actually turning the light switch on work? See, we are legalistic. That's work. So they have, on the Sabbath, all you have to do is run your hand in front of the light and the light goes on. What about an elevator? I can't push a button on an elevator. That's work. And so the elevator stops at every floor. See, we get so legalistic sometimes, caught up in these things that this is what it is, that we miss the thing that is really being spoken about in this larger idea. And so we start out with 10 commandments, and we go to 613 other commandments and laws that we need to follow. And again, what happens here is we start looking at the idea of what was God really trying to say when these things were written, and what was Jesus really trying to say. So we are going to look at murder, we're going to look at adultery, we're going to look at divorce, and we're going to look at hell. And I'm hoping that I can move the rocks around big enough for you that you'll go, oh, so that's what he was, okay, that's where we were going. Okay, I get it now. That makes all the sense in the world. So if you would start off for us and read just the first part, and we'll jump in there.
All the way through.
Yeah.
Murder. You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, "You shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment." But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or a sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, "Reka," is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, "You fool," will be in danger of the fire of hell. Therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar, and to remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave that gift in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them, and then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who's taking you to court. Do it while you're still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will not get out until you've paid your last penny. And then adultery. You've heard that it was said, "You shall not commit adultery." But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. For it's better for you to lose one part of your body than your whole body to go into hell. Divorce. It has been said that anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, makes her the victim of adultery. And anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery.
Okay, so let's just start off and limit these things down to the things that we need to talk about. So if any of you have killed somebody, can you please raise your hand? Okay, we'll start off with the easier. Anybody who's committed adultery, please raise your hand. Woo! Yeah. Okay, so this is a really important thing that we got going on here. This idea that Jesus is speaking with authority, and he's speaking about these very, very serious matters. And a lot of these scriptures have been misused and actually made life very hard for a lot of Christian people within this area. Now, Jesus is speaking, and he's expanding on the idea of anger first. And he's talking about this idea that if you murder, that you actually even murder just by being angry at somebody. Because Jesus is concerned with what's going on in your heart. He's concerned about what you do, but he's concerned on what's going on in your heart. And so he's speaking about this with the idea of, I'm not changing this law, but I'm expanding it, enlarging it. That it's a progressive revelation of understanding what God was trying and what God was doing. So Jesus seems to be lifting us up to another standard of saying, listen, 2,000 years ago, before, we had a low standard. It was just, don't murder. But then you get into all this legalistic idea of like, well, I think God's talking about not murdering other Jews. I think God, and you start trying to come up with ways and pieces of understanding. He said, let me explain to you, it's deeper than that. It's about anger. It's about where it starts. That anger can destroy a relationship, and that it can destroy a relationship akin to murdering a relationship. That Jesus is trying to teach us how to be a community and understand what that community's lines are. that if you are angry at somebody, reconcile with them. Because if you don't, if you hold that anger in, it actually destroys God's purpose for this community. And I think that we would all agree that words can hurt people sometimes deeper than actually physically being hit or hurt. That Jesus is trying to get a group of people to live within this realm of reality right now and right here, and how we treat each other and what is really in our heart. Because I can say, I've never killed anybody, but at the same time, I have to say, have I killed them in my heart with hatred? Have I been holding on to this? And like every day, I hope the worst for these. And so Jesus is trying to get us to understand that anger is the beginning of this. That God is saying something in a deeper way, that I'm trying to create you as people that can explore, can experience and show my love to the world. And if you hold anger in your heart, you'll never be able to show that love. And so Jesus is actually saying that listen, what I'm speaking to you about is the idea that you can actually murder somebody's soul with anger, with being upset at them. I mean, I've had people that have come for counseling, and what has happened to them, the abuse that they have been put through by their father, has in all reality destroyed their soul, and they're fighting for it. How do I forgive this person who abused me and called me names and made me feel like I didn't deserve? And I've got these tapes in my head, and the two men I just married, both of them were abusive too, because that's what I understood love was. And how do I forgive? How do I forgive him? And let this anger out of my heart. See, Jesus is working on the deep stuff, the stuff underneath the glacier, underneath the stuff that you don't really always see. And what ends up happening is that you get to a point where I want revenge. I want this person hurt me so deeply, so suddenly you're destroying yourself on top of it. And that anger leads to a place where it's a disconnect from God. And it can actually rob you. See, anger is deadly. Yeah. So Jesus is talking about our hearts and talking about this idea of that we can, with anger, create our own hell. We can create a really hellish life for ourselves because we're just angry, and I'm going to hold that anger in, and I'm going to get upset, and I'm going to wish that person ever. And there's a point where you go, I gotta let go. I gotta let go. I gotta let go of this anger. And so Jesus is working on something that's deep within inside us. That your heart, what you have inside you, what you feel, can destroy your life or can enhance your life. And so we understand murder and anger are things that are within us that we work hard at letting go of. I was doing a memorial service yesterday for a gentleman who had been fighting with alcoholism for probably his whole life. He had 2 children that he had adopted. in Costa Rica, raised them. And the little girl was sitting right here in front of me, and the son was sitting here, and the son got up and told stories about his dad and how much he loved him and how much he cared about him. Other people came up and told stories about him, good things. Oh, this guy was, when I was having problems here, he was there for me, man. He came there for me. And I'm watching this little girl, and she's like in tears. She's just crying and crying and crying. And she finally raises her hand to me, and I hand her the microphone, and she goes off. My dad has been estranged from me for the last 10 years. This is my daughter that he once saw her at a Walmart parking lot. That he raised me and rejected me and told me every day that I wasn't good enough. And I hate him, and I'm angry at him, and I'm furious at him, and how dare him allow that alcohol to come back into his life because it caused him to fall. And it caused him to die. And he doesn't have the right to take that away from me, she said. Now that little girl, that anger inside her, she's going to have to work through. She's going to have to get through that. And it's not going to be easy. But that anger could destroy her life. And so all we did is we sat and prayed about her. And prayed about, like, God, please, let her understand that you're there with her. Anger can destroy you. It can murder your soul. And so we have to treat it like that. We have to say, I'm not going to let it do this to me. Her brother sat there with her and said, we have to work through this as a family because we're the only two here now. And you could see that it was a small step. But her saying this information, her saying it out loud, it actually started her in the process of maybe forgiving him. We knew him when he was sober. She knew him when he was addicted. Now, so we've got anger off to the side. We've pushed the idea of mercy. This is what we're asking for. Now, Jesus talks about this hell. Hell. How can we have a God that is a God of love, but at the same time, this God is a God who says, oh yeah, by the way, if you've done things wrong, you're going to go to hell for the eternity. Long time. How does that work? I have to tell you, I think Dante, the writer, was the one who came up with this idea. Because in the Hebrew Bible, what you understand is, what's going on is Jesus is not talking about hell somewhere. Jesus is not saying, if you dig down to the center of the earth far enough, you will find a little man in a red outfit with a pitchfork, and that's where you're going to stay. Jesus was actually talking about a valley. The valley is right outside the temple. And this valley for years and years was seen as a place that was not a healthy place to be. Years and years before this, there were sacrifices of children done out in this valley. Whole another tribe of people believing that that's what you had to do. Then later in Jesus' day, when they would get through with the sacrifices, they would drag the stuff out to the valley, the bones and leftover meat, whatever was there, and it would sit in this valley. It was mainly like a human incinerator, and it would always catch on fire. And there were always dogs barking and chewing at the bones. So when Jesus said hell, he actually used the word Gehenna, which means this valley. The idea that you would create your own hell that was as bad as this section filled with bones and filled with decaying flesh and to kill. So Jesus is talking about a real thing that people can understand, and they go, oh, I get it. Yeah, that's a horrible place. It was later called the shadow of death. The shadow of death. That if you walk through this place, it was like the shadow of death. As I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you. This same place. So we have this idea that they're talking about you're going to have judgment, and your judgment is going to be someplace else after you die. It's like, no. Jesus is talking about a real physical thing, that you can make your life a living hell, filled with death, filled with bones of things that are left over. It's a real place. So the understanding, again, is that this place is a place of refuge. They actually talk about it, that there are worms that grow there that cannot seem to be killed. So Jesus is talking about this idea of you can actually create a life that feels like that. And I think most of the time, the things that we have created in our life, a lot of the times they are kind of a living hell, and we've done it pretty much ourselves. So we've talked about murder, we've talked about hell, now we're going to talk about adultery. All those who have taught adultery thing going on, you want to just stand up and confess right now? Okay, no. Okay, so the idea of adultery is that you're not supposed to be sleeping with somebody who is not your husband or wife. That's really the main point here. But you have to understand, too, that you have to see this through the lens of 2,000 years ago. First, the idea of divorce and adultery. If you read the scriptures closely, you'll understand that they're talking to men, not women. They're talking to men. Why? Because it's a male culture. It's all about men. They're talking to men because at that time, if you wanted to divorce somebody, and they did, all I had to do is come up and say to you 3 times, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you, and you're out in the street. Now, what do you have to take with you? Nothing. No law, no legal thing, nothing at all. You're out on the street. And so what ends up happening to you, you become the marginalized person out there that now is trying to figure, what do I do now? How do I get by? How do I get through? How do I have food? And so Jesus is talking very deeply about the idea that, listen, when you just blow up at somebody and say, I divorce you, you put that person in a very horrible position. And so back then, they had this idea that you would actually give them a paper of divorce, which then cleared them to get remarried, to just anything else that you want. But men didn't really feel like they had to do that. You know, men were just, that was the culture. It was all about men, and you could be divorced for anything. Anything. I'm going to divorce you because I didn't like the way you prepared dinner tonight. Out of here. You could, I don't know why we don't still do that. No. But I mean, I think it was a male culture that was going on. So the idea of divorce was, of course, it would be coming from the male. The woman couldn't divorce the man. They have no legal rights. So men treated women in any way they wanted. They treated women as if you were an object. You were an object. You weren't a child of God. In fact, most of the scriptures you kind of run down and it says, and the man had a house and a farm, and he had sheep, and he had pigs, and he had a wife. She's kind of at the bottom of the list. So Jesus is saying, listen, divorce is a horrible thing. And they're also living, again, a historical lens, they're living with Greeks and Romans all around them. And the Greeks were understanding that marriage was fine to have legitimate children, but having affairs and having concubines and having was just fine. That was normal. Everybody does. And so that was what was circulating around here. Jewish faith was going like, we're losing people. Marriage is not existing. And the idea of marriage was that if your job, Barbara, is to get married. That's it. And to have children. And that's all. That was the woman's job. That's how it was seen. And if you displeased the person, they could divorce you. And so Jesus is saying, listen, I don't go for this whole divorce thing. But there's a different world going on now. And if you're abused, you need to get away. If you have been abused, you need to separate. And you can do it in a way that is still Christ-like in its spirit. I talk to people that are getting divorced all the time, and they've reached a point where they can't go on any further, and the relationship becomes completely destructive for them and their family. And then they contact attorneys. Yeah, right. And the attorneys say basically how much money do you have? And I'll tell you how long this is going to last. See, the idea of divorce is that we've reached a point that we can't. And Jesus goes on right after this and talks about when we make a covenant with somebody, when we say that you love this person, or you're going to go through life with them, that you try your best to stick through that. And again, they're talking to men about divorcing women. And so sometimes this verse, which really, really bothers me, is this idea is that some people come in for spiritual counseling and they hear from the church saying things like, well, you are the woman, and it says that you're supposed to submit to your husband, and you really need to, and it's like, wait, this woman has been abused. This woman has been physically and mentally abused for years, and she needs to get out of this. And so I think that if Jesus was here today, that he would be expanding on this thought even larger than this, with this idea that, again, at the heart of this is that anger, and that anger is destructive and can hurt people, and that sometimes you need to step away. But you should always enter into this covenant seriously and deeply. I loved it. We do about 16 hours of counseling, 15 to 16 hours of counseling before we do a marriage for anybody. And 100 questions. And the 100 questions contains everything you could imagine, from financial, sexual, how are you going to raise your children. And so if you and I are getting married, what I do is I give you those 100 questions, and I ask you to fill out the answers, and I take 100 questions, I fill out the answers, and then we come back together and we share what we think and what we thought. And all of a sudden you start to see all these things start to, well, wait, that's a real problem. That's a real issue. We turn people down. I don't think you're prepared to get married. I think you've got some real serious issues that you have to deal with. Because they're going to get married and they're going to be in the divorce court in a year. And I think it would be better if we say, listen, why don't you come next week for some more counseling and let's talk through some of these things. Because I think they'll be healthier for you. So again, Jesus is going through this period and he's saying, we're trying to create this community of people who love and care for each other, and anger will steal your joy. And that if you're sleeping around, it's going to steal your joy because, let's face it, when you're sleeping around, you're lying to the other person, aren't you? I mean, you're coming and going behind the doors, you're saying to your wife, or, again, we're talking to the men here. Listen, I have to work late tonight, okay? Suddenly everything starts to go south. Everything goes south real quickly. So this understanding of committing adultery and the idea of divorce are things that continue to expand in how we understand and how we do these things. But we can see that there's a filter all the way through this, and that is that Jesus is trying to create a group of people that truly love and care for each other and respect each other. That women should be respected and cared for and have every right that a man has. And that divorce can be harmful to just about everybody involved. And that if we continue to show our love and our love for God, we try to show our love for each other. And I think Jesus is also saying that women should not be treated as objects. He was lifting women up. He had women as disciples. So I think this scripture verse and what we go through is that we use it to understand that Jesus is trying to lift us up as a humanity. That our anger can destroy us and destroy relationships. And treating people like things is not what God has called us to do. And so as we make this journey together as a community, we ask ourselves the same thing. Is overall, what is God calling us to do, and how is God calling us to love each other? And how can we support each other? And how do we help people go through the hurt of divorces? I think the first thing they do is they join a community like this. That they can talk and they can say, I'm in pain. I'm having to go through something pretty difficult. And I don't want to hurt that person. They can learn that their anger is something that is destructive, and we cut it down. When I took over here 10 years ago, Diane Schoaf and about 5 other Presbyterian women came here, and they walked around from place to place saying prayers of peace. May there be peace in this church. And everything changed. Everything changed. So today, as we go out, as we experience eating together, let there be peace in your heart. Let you push any anger off to the side. Deal with it. Think about it. Then let go of it. Will you please stand for the benediction? My brothers and sisters, may the peace of Christ pour down upon you and into you. May it wash away anything that you've been holding on to, that you need to let go because it's destroying more than just you. May you realize that God is a God of mercy, and God meets us wherever we are. May that mercy pour down upon you. Pray this in your name, the powerful name of Christ. Amen.
I got nothing new. How could I express all my gratitude? I could sing these songs as I often do, but every song must end, and you never do. So I throw up my hands and praise you again and again, 'cause all that I have is a hallelujah, hallelujah. And I know it's not much, but I've nothing else fit for a king except for a heart singing hallelujah, hallelujah. I've got one response, I've got just one move. With my arms stretched wide, I will